tonight at 6:30 on 11.
This is the CBS Evening News. Bob Schieffer reporting. Good evening. The drug war in Colombia is growing as unbelievable as it is dangerous today. The man known as the Godfather of Colombia, who is the father of 3 leading drug traffickers, urged Pope John Paul to pressure Colombia's president to negotiate a settlement with the drug kingpins. He told the Pope the United States has blackmailed the Colombian government into cracking down on the drug traffic. All that as another explosion rocked the Colombian capital today, and Mark Phillips reports.
El Espectador, the newspaper is called, The Spectator, a frequent crusader against Colombia's cocaine kings and their ever-tightening grip on the country. Early this morning, the paper ceased to be a spectator and became a victim of the current wave of cartel violence.
They're trying to shut our mouths and to say, you cannot work anymore.
It's not the first time the paper has been hit. Its editor was gunned down by drug traffickers 3 years ago. This time it was a powerful bomb placed in a truck that went off just before 7 this morning. All that was left of the truck was the engine. 1 person was killed, 65 were hurt, some seriously. The force of the blast was enough to drive wood through metal. Virtually every newspaper, every radio and TV outlet in Colombia has been threatened with violence, threats now backed up with this bomb. It's an attempt at intimidation to get the drug story off the front pages and off the air, to get the drug lords out of the spotlight and back into the shadows where they prefer to operate.
Well, we have been threatened all the time, and of course we are afraid.
Afraid, but determined. The paper intends to publish again tomorrow. And the Colombian authorities are carrying on their battle as well. Today they released captured business records of one of the 3 biggest drug lords, Gonzalo Gacha. Some of his illegal narcotics millions were channeled into a legitimate holding company which controls 34 businesses, including an investment in a soccer team fittingly called the Millionaires. The drug lords have joined the public relations battle in another way, too. In Medellin, they've built soccer fields on which children play. They've handed out money to the common people. This is Gonzalo Gacha again, ruthless drug lord and self-styled Robin Hood. They are well dug in, these drug lords who live in a world of hillside palaces when they're not on the run, and who can strike back, as they did again today. Even with American help, the Colombians say, this will be a bloody battle that may go on for months or years. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Bogota.
More American help was on the way today, and we have more on that now from David Martin at the Pentagon.
U.S. planes took off from their bases today bound for Colombia, the first installment on $65 million in emergency military aid needed to do battle against the drug cartel. A total of 10 aircraft are being turned over to the Colombians, to be followed by helicopters, trucks, patrol boats, and small arms. The 2 C-130s will be used to meet one of Colombia's most basic needs, transporting troops and equipment into the remote jungle and mountain areas where cocaine begins its journey to American streets.
This aircraft can take off in a 3,000-foot runway area, 60 yards wide. It can make good landings on dirt tracks, doesn't need paved runways.
The 8 A-37 attack planes will be used to seek out and identify targets such as jungle airstrips and cocaine processing labs.
They'll be flying the forward air control missions in the Colombia terrain. That involves finding out where it is and marking the targets.
With the equipment go as many as 100 American servicemen who will train the Colombians, but not, the Pentagon insists, accompany them on operations. More equipment and more trainers almost certainly will follow after President Bush unveils his battle plan for the war on drugs next week. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
Panama's new president made peace overtures to the opposition today, but as long as strongman Manuel Noriega is giving the orders, there is little likelihood of meaningful change. Juan Vasquez now with that story.
Most Panamanians didn't seem to care much that there is a new president. It's a holiday weekend, but they see no reason to celebrate. Government newspapers splashed the names and faces of some new ministers across today's front page. No surprises here. All are known supporters of General Noriega.
Por el gobierno de Estados Unidos contra nuestro pueblo.
The regime's new president, Francisco Rodriguez, said in a televised address to the nation that Washington is to blame for Panama's dilemma. But the United States and the opposition here maintain that the real problem is still General Noriega. And today, the opposition rejected Rodriguez's offer of negotiation.
The only way that we would consider the possibility of having a dialogue is directly with General Noriega and the Defense Forces. And one of the main subjects that have to be brought upon the table is the ousting of General Noriega from his present post.
The opposition also announced a new nonviolent campaign of civil resistance, mainly an economic boycott of the national lottery, government-owned racetracks, government casinos. They say they're hitting Panama's strongman, General Noriega, where it hurts most, in the pocketbook. Bob?
One, I suppose the question I would have is this a tactic that's likely to work?
It's been tried before. There was something similar in 1987, and it didn't work, in part because it was badly organized, there was no follow-up. The one thing that seems to disturb General Noriega are massive street demonstrations that require violent repression. That undermines his claim to popular support, but the opposition says they're tired of being beaten up. They're staying out of the streets for now.
Juan Vasquez in Panama in a report filed just a little while ago. For President Bush, Noriega is a long-standing irritant, in part because of his alleged drug connections. Yet Mr. Bush has not been able to do much about him. Jacqueline Adams reports.
President Bush focused on fishing today, but he has confessed his frustration with the stalemate in Panama. Despite 18 months of economic and diplomatic pressure, Panamanian strongman Manuel Noriega, under indictment in the U.S. for drug trafficking, remains in power. His presence undermining the cocaine wars in Colombia, which the U.S. is now supporting with millions of dollars of military hardware.
It is my judgment that he has, in fact, for some time been helping the cartel. And in fact, the Medellin cartel has been very active in Panama in the last 18 months, practically financing the economy of the country.
With the cartel's power growing in Panama, some observers wonder why neither the president nor the Organization of American States took stronger action this week to protest Noriega's installation of a rump government.
Here is this guy, a major kingpin, who sits there thumbing his nose at the United States of America, when we know, most of us, there is more that we could do.
Privately, Bush administration officials complain that no matter how hard they try,
what about Noriega?
The Noriega issue just won't go away.
Partner? Dog by Noriega.
But the president's aides claim one success. By involving the Organization of American States, they think they've transformed a failure inherited from the Reagan administration into an international failure. Noriega, some experts are saying, should just be ignored.
Noriega is a diversion on our fighting the drugs. It draws attention away from the important things, from the important fronts that we do have to fight. And if you want to get rid of scoundrels, there's a long list. You could begin some other place as well.
And that's advice the president is apparently taking. Noriega is an embarrassment, yes, but officials predict there won't be a single word about this kingpin in the comprehensive anti-drug strategy Mr. Bush will announce on September 5th. Jacqueline Adams, CBS News, with the president in Kennebunkport.
U.S. Customs agents in Oregon today report the seizure of a boat with 20 tons of high-grade hashish hidden in a secret compartment. Street value put at $126 million. The U.S. Coast Guard also made a major drug bust this week. Today, the whole was unloaded in Key West, Florida, more than 11 tons of marijuana on board the Tampa-based fishing boat, which was seized in Mexican waters. 2 U.S. citizens and a Colombian were arrested. And still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, riot police attack anti-apartheid demonstrators in South Africa. And later in the broadcast, a presidential change of pace.
We're not permitted to broadcast scenes of police actions, but today's in Cape Town were swift and violent.
People had been sitting down and singing when the water cannons came. I started spraying and people started getting up, and as they were getting up, the police came round and charged and started hitting.
More than 50 journalists were detained by police in Cape Town as the authorities remain determined to prevent the world and South Africa from seeing what is happening here.
Apartheid is fundamentally vicious and violent, and they're going to respond with violence. And so the world must know where the real terrorism comes from.
While police were cracking down in Cape Town today, much of white South Africa's attention was focused on a stadium in Johannesburg and this nation's other obsession, apart from politics, sports. South Africa has been essentially banned from international sports competition because of its policy of racial segregation. But this week, an international rugby team has been playing here.
For South Africa, this is a Super Bowl and a World Series all rolled into one, but it's not just sports, it's also politics.
And many South Africans deeply resent the fact that this country is in the world's penalty box because of apartheid.
We can't mix politics and sport.
Let the politicians do their politics and sportsmen play sport.
South Africa won today's rugby match, but it's a continuing loser in the world's political arena. As long as the government here chooses a policy of apartheid, it's facing internal defiance and international rejection. Richard Wagner, CBS News, Johannesburg.
While 100,000 people protested today in Soviet Azerbaijan, hardline Politburo member Yegor Lichikov issued a warning in a Soviet television interview. The former chief of ideology called for political action to stop growing nationalism. He stressed the measures must not be repressive or dictatorial. Nowhere in the Soviet Union is the new message of perestroika taken more to heart than in one unique Moscow neighborhood. It has a dazzling display of sight and sound, and Alan Pizzi reports.
For some Russians, the openness and change of glasnost and perestroika isn't the best time since the fall of the Tsar. In fact, this group would like to see the Tsar come back, or at least Stalin-era discipline. The fact that only in these new times could they even talk about it, never mind demonstrate, remonstrate, and demand, doesn't seem to have penetrated. But these are strange times in the Soviet Union. An itinerant balalaika player, strumming about remembering the past, was told by a passing drunk, "You don't know how bad it was, you're too young." These Ukrainians, silently demonstrating for recognition of their church, are old enough to remember when such action would have been a one-way ticket to the Gulag. Are they brave or foolish, or have the times really changed? Certainly the background music has. Moscow's famous Arbat pedestrian mall may not look like Basin Street, but jazz is just as much fun here as it is in New Orleans. It's also another twist on the new tolerance of private enterprise. That has hit the Arbat with a vengeance. The art has that cheerful trash look, and the hucksters are already trebling their prices for the tourists. That's about $1,400 at the official exchange rate. Money is on these young men's minds, too. Their message is Moscow today. If you want to get something, you've got to bribe somebody. There's something new every day in these new times, even for those who would like to go back to the old times. Alan Pizzi, CBS News, Moscow.
An Israeli soldier was shot to death today by a gunman who crossed the border from Jordan. The gunman was also killed. Earlier, Israeli soldiers shot and killed 3 Palestinians on the West Bank. With yesterday marking the 50th anniversary of the beginning of World War II, we turn in our Washington notebook tonight to a subject that is drawing more and more attention in the capital. The wave of change now sweeping Eastern Europe. Tonight we're focusing on what it means for the two Germanys and whether a possible change in their relationship could mean a major change in relations between the Western powers and the Soviet Union.
50 years after the end of the war, the German question has not been resolved. It hasn't really been touched.
East Germany's economy works, even though it is one of the most rigidly communist regimes in the Eastern Bloc. It sends much-needed consumer goods into the Soviet Union, and nearly 500,000 Soviet troops are stationed there.
East Germany is the crown jewel of the Soviet Empire. It's a vital strategic asset to the Soviet Union.
But it is a jewel that is showing cracks, and the resulting strains could eventually be felt far beyond East Germany's borders. With more and more protests, anti-government slogans, and peace vigils, the entrenched and aging regime of hardline communist boss Erich Honecker is worried, and with good reason.
How long can you maintain the fiction that this is the will of the East German people when they are screaming out through every hole in the Iron Curtain? And how long can you prevent some reemergence of the very nationalist issue of German identity?
And that is what gives security planners in the West some pause. More and more experts say the growing discontent in East Germany could be the catalyst for some kind of new relationship between East and West Germany, perhaps even reunification, a development that would not only change the face of modern Europe, but the whole equation of East-West relations.
Now Gorbachev is talking about a common European home. You cannot have a common European home while the Germans are divided against themselves. And so if Gorbachev is serious, the only question is when.
If that is the only question, it is a very complicated one for the West. With more than 240,000 American troops based there, West Germany is the linchpin of the NATO alliance. So even talk of stronger ties between East and West Germany gives many U.S. strategists the shivers.
Long before you see the reality of a reunited East and West Germany, you see a neutralized West Germany. Germany perhaps with American forces, Allied forces removed, and a probably much more brazen subsidizing of the Soviet bloc with West Germany's formidable economic strength. All of that would translate into real security concerns, I think, for the West as a whole and certainly for the United States.
There's some big sports news in Dallas tonight. Southern Methodist University is playing its first football game since it was banned from the sport 2 years ago for violating NCAA rules. James Sartori reports.
Strike up the band, dust off the pom-poms. Football is back at Southern Methodist University. Frenzied cheers after quiet years of disgrace. SMU got the so-called death penalty, banishment from football, when the NCAA found that boosters were handing out cash to attract top players. Eventually, SMU's coach, athletic director, and university president all resigned. 2 years later, the school's new president says SMU has learned its lesson.
We're not prepared to win if winning involves cheating.
What we want to do is just sharpen up on everything.
Players now face higher academic standards and much closer supervision. Right now, though, the Mustangs' biggest challenge is to prove they can still play major college football while playing it straight. They aren't starting with much. Of 89 players, only 7 have played college ball before.
We don't have a whole lot of experience. We don't have a whole lot of size. We really don't have a whole lot of anything.
What SMU does have is a clean slate from which to build what is likely to be the most scrutinized program in college football, and a coach who's determined to prevent any more meddling by overzealous alumni.
I said I would punch him in the mouth, and I think that's what everybody tagged on to, and I wouldn't literally do that, but they understand what I meant.
Despite the severity of SMU's punishment, some aren't convinced the message is getting through to other schools.
Quite frankly, I don't think college football's learned a damn from SMU being undercut, because I see cheating going on all over the place still. I don't think any of them have been scared the least little bit.
Tonight, SMU braves the odds. The long road back begins with Rice University, a team with the longest losing streak in the division. The Mustangs are a 16-point underdog. James Hattori, CBS News, Dallas.
An autopsy today found that baseball commissioner Bart Giamatti died of constrictive coronary artery disease. There's also evidence he suffered a prior heart attack, though may not have known it. Giamatti's deputy, Faye Vincent, was named acting commissioner today. The panda cub born to Ling Ling at Washington's National Zoo yesterday is reported to be fighting for its life tonight. The cub was placed in an oxygen tent after it was found to be suffering from a severe infection. If it lives, the panda will be the first born in this country to survive infancy. We are told that students of the modern presidency will know the answer to the question, who is Mr. Smooth? We're also told that those of us who don't will find the answer in this next report from Wyatt Andrews.
They call this gimme golf, mulligan golf, where you hit it till you're happy with the shot. Weekend duffers, take heart. The President of the United States may play this game worse than you do.
Oh, sank it.
Pick it up. We nobody saw that.
Oh, yeah?
Nobody saw that.
It was even his goal on this vacation to improve his long-ignored game. The president is an accomplished athlete. At 65 years old, he jogs, plays a strong game of tennis, and can still rip a softball to the opposite field. All the more embarrassing for him to have these conversations with his golf ball.
Oh, no!
If golf measures a man's personality, it's worth noting that George Bush, the competitor, makes sure that if his swing can't win a match, good handicapping will.
Get me 3 aside and nothing for Spike and Jebby 5 aside.
Oh, shoot! The president's conversations with himself make him a one-man twosome. Most politicians have a stage persona, but George Bush has named his.
Mr. Smooth is back. Nice and easy, just as Mr. Smooth.
President George Bush driving.
CBS Sports golf analyst Ben Wright has played a few rounds with Mr. Smooth.
An iron shot from the president. Once again, his legs are very stiff. There's no knee flex. And oops. Oh, dear. So it was a kind of aerobics golf. He always seemed to be in a frightful hurry, as if he'd got something far more important to do.
1 hour and 51 minutes. 18 holes.
Is that called aerobic golfing?
Called polo. I'm dedicating this shot to my wife, Barbara, who's been...
And just like any president, this one blusters.
And this shot's to Bar, wherever she is out there.
But on this day, he just couldn't help it. He wasn't born with a silver wedge in his hands.
Bar? Bar, wherever you are.
Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, with Mr. Smooth in Kennebunkport.
Now he's got the weapon.
Mr. Smooth and I have a lot in common on that shot. That's the news. Goodbye.
Buddy and his Eagles, Marino and Miami. Their preseason collision tonight on CBS.
This is CBS.
Coming up next on 11 News, record